Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. Today I want to talk about small adjustments that you can make to your baits that will without a doubt generate more bites for you. It's surprising to me that we don't see a lot of companies come out with standard baits. Some do, but the majority of these baits do not have these small adaptations that can really help you catch more fish. I've had so many experiences over the years where I make a small change to my baits and it leads to not just what I consider more bites, it leads to me getting bit versus not getting bit. I can't tell you the number of times I've had experiences with making these small changes that have really helped me. So today what I want to talk about are 4 simple adaptations or changes or the addition of small components to your treble hooks that will get you more bites without a doubt. I'm not saying you always got to do it, but these changes will get you more bites. And in some circumstances, they will be the single most important factor that you can do to generate more bites. Before I get into it, I do want to remind you that if you are looking to get some of the components to make these changes, I've got a link in my description to therealshot.com. They're a local tackle shop here. If you do your shopping there, use the discount code that I've got in that description. It'll save you 10% off your order and it helps support the channel, so it's a win-win for everybody. At the same time, I have completed a bunch of new lake breakdowns that you can go check out at fishthemoment.com. Myself, Randy Blockett, and Johnny Morris are doing a bunch of different lake breakdowns. The chances are your local lake is covered there, and if it's not, you can request it through a personal lake breakdown. So head over to fishthemoment.com, check that out. The link is also in the description for the video. All right, guys, so over the years, I have seen small changes to your treble hooks generate a ton of additional bites. And so I want to walk you through some of these simple changes that you can make and show you how to do it. And it's really simple, but very key at times. The first one I'm just going to go is a pretty standard addition, and that's to add feathers to your treble hooks. So in this case, these are some old ones actually. These are the Excalibur ones. I'll buy a bunch of these when I see them come up for sale, because a lot of times feathered treble hooks will come up for sale and you can buy them at really discounted prices. So I will buy them. I also tie a bunch of my own feathered treble hooks. The feathered treble hook, in my opinion, is really key on topwater baits. It will generate more bites, especially if you're using like a popper style bait. Because what happens when that bait, is getting chugged along, those feathers will spread out and they look very much like the tail fin of a bait fish or a bluegill, and it gives it a very realistic look. At the same time, depending on the materials that you use, that treble hook will be pulled up and almost floated by the feathers or whatever material it is, and it gives it a more bait fish looking profile to a fish that's looking at it on the surface. Versus if you don't have it, your treble hook's going to hang down and they're going to see the treble hooks, but they're not going to see that same tail profile that it may resemble a bluegill or a bait fish. So in my opinion, it is important that it camouflages the hook, but at the same time, it creates a better looking profile, a more natural profile. I do also like to use feathers, but when I use feathers on like a jerk bait, I like to put it on, say, the middle treble hook or even the tail treble hook. I don't like to use nearly this much material. I would prefer to use just one short, simple feather versus like a bunch of feathers. This is a very good tail looking treble hook. The reason for that on a jerkbait is it's going to create resistance and you're not going to get the same slashing motion because it'll be like having a windsock on the back. It wants to grab water and keep the bait in its position. The thing is though, that tail material can generate a lot of additional bites. And here's an example for you. I have a lake here in Wisconsin where if I go out, I can go down whatever bank it is. And if this is, say, fall fishing, if I have a white tail feather on the back, I will catch walleye on a jerkbait all day long. like walleye and pike. Those are the two main species that will catch on that. If I take that same colored jerkbait, replace it with a orangish red tail feather, I will catch 10 to 1 smallmouth bass. And here's the reason for it. The lake that I fish has a bunch of what's called rosy red minnows. They are a very pinkish, dark red minnow. They're very small. In my opinion, what's happening is the tail feather is resembling that rosy red, and therefore smallmouth are coming up and they're just grabbing it. You will almost always have them hooked by the tail, versus the white feather, which is when I'm catching the walleye and the pike. They will almost always have the whole bait, which to me means that tail feather resembles more of just a larger profiled bait fish versus just the small rosy red. I can tell you guys without a doubt, I have fished this lake for 20 years, and I have done so many experiments with other people in the boat where one of us will throw a white feather and one of us will throw a red or orange feather, and it's unbelievable how much that matters. So that is one simple piece of experience that I've had that shows to me how important it is. Now, along this same line, another thing that I like to do is use Flashabou material. And I've got two baits here. This is an old Lucky Craft wake tail that I've put a Flashabou tail on. So the tying of this material is the same way as tying on feathers, and it's similar. The issue is the Flashabou, in my opinion, resembles a pumpkin seed tail like nothing else in the water. When you have that in the water, it will give off that turquoisey yellow color that a sunfish has. And I don't personally think you can find anything that resembles that better. So depending on where you're fishing, you may really want to use Flashabou material. And it comes in all different colors. I mean, this is just a bunch of the different ones that I use. You can get chartreuses, you can get blues. This is one that's got more of that turquoise color in it. The thing is, guys, for those of you that fish lakes, doesn't matter where you're at around the country, that have a predominant bluegill population that is a good forage species for bass, Flashabou will outproduce a feather any day of the week, in my opinion. For example, you go to Lake Ouachita. I've fished there several times, Forest Wood Cups. It'll be August. There are always fish up shallow feeding on bluegill beds. And there's a bunch of different types of sunfish in there, and they've got that greenish turquoisey tail. I get way more bites on this than I will a feathered treble hook. So to me, that makes a big difference, and I am a huge fan of the Flashabou material. Also, if you're fishing water that's got a little bit more color to it, I think that Flashabou material gives off more flash than say a white feather. So those two are more basic. The Flashabou material, the first bait the only bait that I know that comes with that, and I do not even know if it still does because I haven't bought one in a while, but the old chug bugs, the old Storm pre-Rapala chug bugs, that to me is one of the reasons why the chug bug was such a good bait and is still a good bait. Okay, so that's two of the things. The next is an adaptation that I've made over the years. This is something that, it's again a way to recycle a bait. So here is that's the back end of a Zako trailer from a chatterbait. And what I'll do with these is once I've used up a swim bait style, a straight-tailed swim bait style plastic, instead of throwing it away, I'll cut the back portion of it off and slide that up, or slide the treble hook up the middle of that so that the tail will lay like that in the water. Because if this is on a topwater bait or a crankbait, depends how you know how to rig it. But if you're fishing a topwater bait, I like to have it like that because the tail then lays in the water straight out and it gives it that bait fish profile. At the same time, I've had really good luck with this as a trailer on, say a chatterbait or a spinnerbait, just because it gives that tail profile, and I'll have it so that the tail is vertical in the water, right? So it's a way to recycle old baits and give some additional look to some new look to some old baits. You could slap this on a crankbait. when it's coming through the water, it looks like you've got a tail flapping behind the crankbait. Simple adjustment, good way to reuse a bait, and it will get you more bites. The last one, again, is not something that's super new, but it might be new to some of you. It's taking small spinner blades, and in some cases you can use bigger spinner blades, and attaching them to the treble hook. So in this case, these are the flashy accent. These come with the plastic sleeve over it. So you can put these on as simply as just sliding that over the tip of one of the barbs of your treble hook, so you have it coming off one hook on that treble hook. You could even attach 3 of them and create more of a bait fish profile if you wanted, one off each hook. What I prefer to do is take an old paper clip. So this is just a chunk of paper clip. I'm using a bigger blade here just for representation. And I'll take a piece of old paper clip, put the swivel through it, and then I'll take a treble hook like this Fusion 19. I'll slide that up the side so that I have it right on the shank. Hopefully you can see that. And then I'll take just some thread or braided line, wrap it around, put a couple of dabs of super glue on it, and that's not coming off. So at that point, that's really mounted onto the treble hook. If you don't want to permanently mount it on the treble hook, then I would recommend getting something like these flashy accents. But guys, those are situations where, you know, any of those adjustments can generate more bites. I like to use the blade more when I'm fishing in dirtier water because it creates a little bit more flash, a little bit more water disturbance to draw fish to it. You know, the plastic tail I like to use just to make a bait look more lifelike. And again, that also gives off a little bit more water displacement if you have it, say, on a crankbait. And then anytime I'm throwing a topwater, I almost always have a feathered treble hook or a Flashabou treble hook on because it draws more bites. I cannot tell you the number of times with a topwater bait where, you know, I may have a bait like this wake tail sitting there in the water, and it actually would sit more like this bait. And you'll be sitting there and it's almost like watching a bobber. The fish will come up, grab the tail, and pull it down. And when you catch that fish, they'll be just barely skin hooked on the tail because they're not coming up to hit the bait. They're coming up to hit the tail because the tail looks like a minnow or, you know, some sort of larva or a dragonfly. It's a much less intimidating object. And they come up and eat that versus devouring the entire bait. It's kind of that idea of putting like a bowl of M&Ms in front of somebody or a giant cookie. I mean, in my case, I'd eat both, but a lot of people may eat one M&M versus, you know, that cookie or a whole hamburger or something along those lines. It's like that small, simple snack that looks a lot more lifelike than the entire topwater bait. So guys, experiment with it. Give it a try. I'm telling you, there are situations where you will get bit with these on and not get bit. Like, it's that drastic of a difference. And there's times where it may get you just 1 or 2 bites, but in general, I don't think you're hurting yourself ever really by using these. So give it a try. I hope this was helpful. If you enjoyed it, hit the like button. Stay tuned. We'll have another good video coming out tomorrow.